Welcome to Cordkillers Reckoning. The world of entertainment is turned upside down, and we're just trying to find out how to watch what we want, where we want, whenever we want. I'm Tom Merritt. Brian, where's the good stuff?
Oh my goodness, it's all over this beautiful, beautiful land. Austin weather in December. It's a good thing, Tom.
What do you got? What do you got there?
It's 68 degrees.
69. We're almost exactly the same weather right now. That's amazing.
Right on.
Yeah. Given that somebody somewhere is upset with us that it's warmer where we are than it is where they are, let's distract them with the supply run.
Supply run, supply run, supply run.
We have a wonderful article to talk about today from Variety called "The Top 10 Grossing Movies of the Year Are All Sequels." If you count Wicked as a sequel of its Broadway show, it's not technically a sequel, but it's not an original property made specifically for the silver screen. So I think we can keep that in there.
And on top of that, though, it is also, if you're going to count Mad Max Fury or Furiosa, whatever that one was, it's like that. I mean, if that one's a sequel, it's just another story in that
It's
world.
A prequel, right? Yeah, exactly. So Inside Out 2, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, Moana 2, rocketing up the charts this weekend. Then of course, Mad Max Fury Road, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or Furiosa, I guess, is the new one. Fury Road being the original. Anyway, the column, because I think this is more of an opinion piece, is from Owen Gleiberman, and says, "Is Hollywood's addiction to sequels cannibalizing its future?" The premise is sequel culture craves that deja vu nirvana, but like all addictions, it provides a high that eats away at you at the same time. It's sustaining without being nourishing. So at first I thought maybe the premise would be, well, if everything's sequels, won't you run out of, material to make sequels out of? But that's not what he's saying. He's saying a more nuanced point, I think, which is sequels just are never quite as fulfilling as originals, with occasional exceptions. And he even notes some exceptions in there. But I don't know. Gleiberman seems to be suggesting that sequels are the junk food of movies. Brian, do you agree?
Man, there was a time I certainly would have agreed. They tend to be a naked cash grab, and the fantasy that all consumers want to believe is that hardworking, well-intended people at the movie factory slave away to make movies for you, and greedy corporations just want the movies to make money. Boo, greedy corporations. But now we live in this highly fractionalized, splintered megaverse where anybody can make anything. You no longer have an excuse. If you have the perfect script, great. Do it with pipe cleaners, release it on YouTube. If it is such a good script, it will become a mega blockbuster. There's no more excuses. And so now there's sort of my attitudes have changed because maybe this is partly because I've been reflecting on that golden age of television, that magical window when The Shield, The Wire, The Sopranos, Mad Men all happened at around the same times along with Breaking Bad. That was like the last gasp of delightful, surprising prestige television where they could justify the insane expense for those experiments because they had piles of cash to sit on. Nowadays, to spend the kind of money to pull off something like the Marvel Cinematic Universe with that level of polish, frame-by-frame digital makeup, incredible effects, writing punch-ups to beat the band, it just takes enough money that, to be honest, Tom, I don't see it as responsible in any way to create a movie of blockbuster caliber that doesn't have a bankable IP. Now, that doesn't mean I want sequels. I don't want the same story because, again, Alien to Aliens, those are two very, very different movies, one of which we'll talk about in a moment. But they are in the same universe and it's a bankable IP. Now, you could do the same thing. You could tell a very, very different movie, and bless their hearts, they certainly tried to with Joker 2. Didn't end up working out, too self-referential, etc. But tell all the stories But I think at a certain level of excellence, it requires a certain level of budget, which requires a certain level of assurances to the investors, which requires established IPs. Like, I think it will be sequel palooza minus mega books being turned into mega franchises.
Yeah, Gleiberman points out that sequels had a bad rap in the 80s because they really were seen as just cash grabs, because often they were. Often a studio would underfund a sequel and put it out hoping that the name recognition alone would be the marketing, and the people wouldn't care if all the same actors weren't in there. They'd just go to see the next whatever it was in the series, right? And today it's different. Today sequels do tend to get closer to the level of their original movie in the series, and sometimes they're planned that way. Lord of the Rings was shot entirely in one go because it's based on one book that was broken into 3 parts, so it became a movie that was broken into 3 parts. So I think there is a different landscape now. On the other hand, the reason I mention all that difference is that I don't think the motivations have ever been different. I think every movie studio wants a bankable IP if they're going to spend money on the movies. Yeah, I think you're right. The pressure's maybe a little more intense these days because of the change in viewer behavior, but that just means that you can make movies that are going on Netflix or things that are going on YouTube, and those have easier financials, right? So we have fewer things that can be successful in the movie theater, but we have more places for things to be seen. And where I end up is that I think it's less about the money, because that seems constant to me. It's always like, is this going to return its money? And to me, it's more about the art of cinema getting caught up to writing so that it can more reliably create a sequel that satisfies the fans. And then I'll tie that into the same thing that causes almost every piece of genre fiction to be a series these days. If book 1 sells well, then they're going to sell book 2 to most of that same audience, and most of book 3 to that same audience. Book 2 and 3 will be a little bit less, but that's why science fiction and fantasy authors get 3-book deals for series out of the gate, because you just know if people like it, they're going to like more of it. And I think that's no different with movies.
Yeah, and I suppose it's a little bit like is it supposed to be 5 blind men examining an elephant?
Oh, the Plato's thing where they're in a cave and like, it's a rope. No, it's a tree trunk. No, it's
right, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, if you're only looking at, for example, take the movie Cars, right? Cars was a Pixar movie. It was a ripoff of Doc Hollywood. It came and it went. No big deal. If you only look at the box office and you only look at the movie. When you look at the broader story of the world that was created and the merchandise that the toys that it sold, it is far and away the biggest bankable IP.
Still making money without having a movie out, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And I mean, there's the theme park and. So in that regard, it's. I used to want to believe that art could be judged in isolation. I no longer believe that. I believe that there is no art without somebody to be experiencing the art. I don't know if it was being a magician that caused that to happen to me or what.
That like you just accidentally or possibly on purpose summarized the entire field of semiotics.
I don't know that word. What does that mean?
Semiotics is like a not a postmodern, but it's in that same family of philosophies where meaning is created between the sign, the signifier, and the signified. And so you have different types of meaning depending on where you sit in that perspective, but there is no meaning without all 3.
Yeah, well, and I guess let's go ahead and throw our current full experience watch of The Shield in there. If anybody didn't know, the 20-year-old spoiler, there's a bit of a surprise in the very pilot episode of The Shield, and it only is of significance if you understood what a pilot is and the job of a pilot to do, and then to see the rules get flipped upside down in that made it something different and important that played into the overall experience of the entire artistic endeavor. And likewise, I think that I would say just in general, focusing just on theatrical releases of single movies, is it too smug and pretentious for me to say, Tom, I've moved beyond such thoughts. I no longer regard anything in isolation.
I'm from the kingdom of the level beyond isolation.
I used to be like that. And then I went to Hollywood, and by God, what I saw there, Tom.
I went to university on the mean streets of Hollywood. No, I know what you're saying. And I think there's something to that. Like, this is why I am always on one about nothing is actually a good movie or a bad movie, or a good TV show or a bad TV show, because we all bring different experiences and get different things out of them. But there's a bell curve where, 98% of people are going to think that one's bad, and so you can judge, but you should never be surprised when someone likes something that you don't. And I think that plays a big part in this. But at the same time, large amounts of people like sequels. And so I don't know if I would call it the junk food of movies, although large amounts of people like junk food, because and Gleiberman makes a good argument for this, but I feel like he also undermines his own argument by talking about how much more quality there is to sequels, and how a lot of the sequels, including Wicked, including Mad Max, aren't sequels. They're ventures in a franchise. Wicked very clearly is that, right? There wasn't a movie about Wicked. It was a Broadway musical that was a derivative of a written work. And they have now taken that Broadway musical derivative and turned it into a movie, even though there's also a movie directly of the written work. Is Wicked a sequel to The Wizard of Oz? I mean, sort of. It's in the same IP, right? So I feel like you can do sequels that are very good. It's a harder task. That said, people love to get more of the story from the story they love, and maybe it won't always rise to their expectations, but I don't know if I'd call that junk food unless the original was junk food, right? Eating more Twinkies is definitely eating more Twinkies, but if you have a second helping of kale salad, you've had a second helping of kale salad. Maybe you don't need all that fiber. I don't know, but it's not worse than the original.
Well, I think about franchises less as substance and more as skins. I mean that in the role-playing game sense, right?
Uh-huh.
Where it's like, look, you could tell Hamlet in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You could tell
Absolutely.
Romeo and Juliet in the DC Universe. You could tell, truthfully, once you learn enough about story structure, you start to kind of get a little nervous and be like, there really is only generously 21 different types of stories, full stop. And outside of that, it's just a matter of, put them in a blender and sprinkle whatever IP, you got to pick a skin for it.
But the skins can be good or bad, right? Like you've played a video game with like, these skins are awful, and you've played video games like, these skins are amazing, and you like the amazing skins.
So, well, let's do this. Let's have everybody go to cordkillers@gmail.com. Drop us a note. What is the best? Give us a sequel that's better than the original, or at least so different that it's hard to even consider it a sequel. And give us an example of a naked cash grab that left you angry.
Yeah. I'll go ahead and say, if you send us Godfather 2, Empire Strikes Back, or The Dark Knight, that counts.
Yep.
But man, if you send us one that isn't those three, that'll be a little more interesting.
Yeah, surprise us. In fact, I'll bet that there are some movies out there that we don't even know are sequels.
Right. Like I actually think a lot of people don't realize The Dark Knight is a sequel, right? Because it stands alone. A lot of people just watch that.
Unpopular opinion. A bigger fan of Batman Begins.
Well, there you go. See, and a lot of people are like, wait, that's the same. That's related. Yes, it is. I feel like there is a balance between needing originality, which again, forget the money. It's hard to get someone to take a flyer on something they don't know. Right? Originality means like, you've never heard of this before, but trust me, you're going to like it. And that's really hard to convince people to do versus, I know you love Batman, watch this new movie, The Dark Knight, right? And then people will go for it. So I feel like television is almost a farm club for this. I wonder if in the future we see more TVs to movies franchises because people tend to want to take a flyer on a TV show more often than they'll take a flyer on a movie, especially a movie where you have to get out of your house and go to a theater to watch it.
Yeah, that tracks. And also, I'm okay with it. I mean, depending on the nature of the story. I don't know, though. Like, even, like, there's some very visually impressive, high-budgeted shows that just didn't capture me, like Foundation was one where it's like, when I think of the visuals of Foundation, and even from the episodes I saw, the acting, everything was great, but it just, only saw 3 episodes, the end.
Yeah, but you took a flyer on it versus
Correct.
If it had been like, Brian, you have to go, I know you only have to go across the street, but you have to leave your house. You have to leave your house on an epic journey, and you can refuse this call if you want, but eventually you'll learn that you have to go to this theater to watch it. Like, maybe you wouldn't have even tried it. And I think that's my contention is we see TV shows being turned into movies. We see more plans for TV shows like Game of Thrones even being turned into movies. Downton Abbey did this as well. I wonder if that becomes a more common occurrence where it's not sequels to movies, it's sequels to TV shows. And the original IP is that lower barrier to entry. Well, I'll just watch 1 episode. It's only an hour or a half hour, and then see if I like it, which gets people to adopt things like White Lotus, et cetera, more quickly.
I also wonder if, talking about the farm teams, I wonder if the independent creators on YouTube, if they have a big enough following, if that doesn't become the reliable, bankable, maybe for like a Blumhouse level production, something affordable. I
feel like that's the video games of movies right now. Because there was a tranche of movies from YouTube stars in like 5 to 10 years ago that the premise was, we'll put this in the theaters and make it a movie because their fans will all watch it. But their fans also all got digital copies and stayed home and just watched the digital copies. Right. And the movies were never as good because the YouTube stars were really good at their YouTube shows, but they had to learn a new skill, And it's the same thing with video games. Like, video games were great, but adapting those stories into theater level movies, it was harder. Now more people have figured out how to do it, and it's happening more. I think that'll happen with YouTube creators as well. More people will figure out like, oh, this is how we can create a movie around a YouTube creator successfully.
Yeah.
I like that. Do you think people will create movies out of Patreons?
No, but I do believe that Patreon is a wonderful way to keep people loud, live, and independent, including this very program. That's right, friends. Head on over to patreon.com/Cordkillers. Support us. Get early access to the full experience. Get exclusive access to our After Talk segment. We love our patrons. We hope our patrons love us. Why don't you be inside the fold instead of outside in the cold, harsh winters? Some places here in the United States, it's 15 degrees. You know where it is?
That's
right now,
enough.
somewhere between 68 and 69 degrees on the inside. So be on the inside by going to patreon.com/Cordkillers.
That's really all you need to say on that. And yet, wouldn't it be cool if Cordkillers was a movie?
Yes, it would be.
Let's move on to the search party. Just a couple of things to point out to you, as there weren't a whole lot of announcements because of the holidays in the U.S., but Peacock, EA Sports, and Genius Sports are going to host the Madden NFL cast during the Houston Texans Kansas City Chiefs game on Saturday, December 21st at noon Eastern Time. It will blend traditional live football coverage with video game elements. Now, we've had a lot of these kinds of things, Brian, where it's like the players will turn into Pixar characters, or the Disney thing where it's like, it's pretty much just a skin around the game you're watching with some stuff on the side for the kids. This is a new take. Not saying it's better or worse, but it's a new take. A dedicated commentary team with NBC Sports' Paul Burmeister doing play-by-play, former NFL quarterback, YouTuber, and Madden NFL expert Kurt Benkert, utilizing graphic overlays from the game to discuss and predict play options, and 6-time Cincinnati Bengals Pro Bowl wide receiver Chad Ochocinco serving as a real-time player ratings adjuster. So the premise here is not, we've skinned the game. The premise is, these are people who play Madden. And what if people who played Madden described the game through their lens of like, if this were a Madden game, this is what I would do. And then you've got an actual wide receiver going like, all right, well, if this was a Madden game, this player would have this rating. Also joining the production will be pro Madden NFL player Henry Leverett, who won the Ultimate Madden Bowl championship ring in February and is the first player in Madden NFL Championship Series to reach $1 million in career earnings. I assume he's there to just provide color commentary, like a player provides color commentary of like, well, when you're playing Madden, this is the thing you have to realize about playing Madden. Except there's a real football game happening that which is the context for all their commentary.
This, I think, is it was probably a blind spot that was just laying there in plain sight the whole time, but I think it's brilliant. Forgive the surface level analysis here, but when you just change the skins of the character, you've changed just the skins, right? I mean, the difference is skin deep. Whereas Madden has changed the core of the game. That whole the pulley system that they got with what looks like a floating droid for the camera, that is specifically so that they can recreate the impossible angles that people were accustomed to seeing Madden played at. Likewise, the way people play the game, getting down to the end zone, realizing nobody's going to tackle you, running out the clock back and forth, just that is a Madden strategy that was developed on Super Nintendo consoles for decades and then showed up in the actual game. By making this what seems like yet another, what if it's football but hosted by 4 ladies? What if it's football but you saw Simpsons characters in the background? Instead of all of that, we're actually saying, what if it was football only speaking to your personal experience with the game? So it used to be, when you think of the stereotype of the dad at Turkey Day watching anybody play, he's in the stereotype leaning over and explaining to his son that back when he played for so-and-so, he would do this, that, or the other thing. But we've gotten away from that universal shared lived experience. And so what we're doing now with this is tapping into a more universal shared experience. Everybody's played Madden at least once at this point. So now when they explain, we're doing this for this reason to get this effect, everybody's like, oh, I get it now because I did the same thing.
Yeah. There are probably, I don't even want to look this up because I'm pretty sure it's true. So I'll just say it. There are more people who have played Madden than have played football.
Oh, like that's 100% true.
That's just got to be true, right? There's no way it's not. And so, yeah, your analogy is well taken. Dad explaining what it was like when he played to the son who's never played yet and may never is different than the son explaining to the dad, when you play Madden. Dad, well, you remember that one time you played Madden with me? Yeah, let me explain that. And I could see on your face already, you're like, and probably most of the dads have played Madden too. Like, well, this is not a niche thing.
Another real life experience is, look, man, I think I've golfed 3 times that wasn't putt-putt, like real golf course golfing. I played a hell of a lot of video golf, decades of video golf. And as a result, go ahead, throw on golf. And I'll be able to look at the numbers on screen and be like, ooh, really, a 3-wood?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
That's because that game, obviously that's so in your head anyway to begin with. It's like I'm able to project myself into that experience and try to read the green exactly as the players are doing. But likewise, the difference with, with football is it's the same thing.
Yeah. Well, and we started with the analogy of dad telling son about football because historically only men have been allowed to play football, tackle football with pads. But that's not true of Madden. So mom and the daughters are definitely going to be involved in this conversation as well. And the circle is complete. Like, for the longest time, we wanted video games to be more like real life, right? More like real whatever. And with Madden, it was more like real sports. Like, what if I were really playing the game? And let me get to me as close to that as possible. And to your earlier point, slowly the game started to have to catch up, or I'm sorry, the actual real life game had to start to catch up with the video game. And the circle is complete with this, where the video game is now the lens through which you view the real life game.
Well, and one last note on it. If nothing else, think about how many things that you intuitively know that maybe if they're talked about wouldn't resonate with you, but if you saw it from a familiar perspective, you would suddenly know what does and doesn't make sense, or what is and isn't a surprise. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah. And that makes watching it more valuable to you, right? Because you're plugged in that way. Yeah. And I'm sure there's at least a couple people listening to this or watching this right now who are like, I just want the old fashioned way. You'll get that. You can watch the regular sportscast. That's what streaming has brought us. Is it brought the cost down enough that they can afford to have an entire second broadcast multiple ways. And this is one of them. So if you want to watch the Texans Chiefs game with the regular way of watching, you can do that. They're not taking it away. They're just doing a Madden NFL cast in addition to that.
Well, and remember all of the moving pieces in this kind of thing. So on the one hand, you have the benefit to the audience is a new perspective on a game that's more familiar for them and closer to what the way they play it. This is also, although they'll never advertise it this way, my guess is they've already had these characters meet each other, and they've done chemistry tests to kind of see who gets along or whatever. This is a showcase, an audition, because it may be that maybe the actual how many sitcoms have started off with one conceit and then just totally bailed on it because very quickly nobody was there for the conceit, they were there for the characters. Which, by the way, spoiler alert, that's all anybody cares about is characters. We all pretend that we are worried about structure and story, but we're not. But so same thing for this. It's like they may within 6 months just give up. All of a sudden it's just a token of, something Madden, here's a controller. Anyway, you're here for us characters.
It's quite possible that this just becomes another crew, and even likely that it becomes another crew. And likewise, I imagine the main broadcast is going to borrow a couple of tricks that end up being super popular on this. We're like, we wouldn't turn the main broadcast into a Madden thing, but we could use that thing that they use. Let's incorporate that. So it's going to improve the main broadcast as well. I would guess anyway.
Yeah.
I'm with you. This seems to be a more interesting approach to the alternative broadcast. And all of those alternative broadcasts are made possible by the streaming world. If you don't have low cost broadcasting equipment and low cost transmission abilities, lower cost than it would over cable or broadcast, you don't have them doing this.
Yeah. Salute to all those who came before, but of everything we've mentioned in terms of presenting the game a different way, this one seems to be the most substantive, the most thought out.
I guess I'm slowly accidentally changing this into no, technology won't replace your jobs. It makes new ones. Like we now have twice the broadcasters.
Look, that is front of mind and is going to remain front of mind for a long time.
Yeah. The other thing we've got in the search party for you today is another trailer for the Squid Game. This just shows you more scenes of how 456 fits into the new games, and a little more of him trying to convince everybody to bail. I think that I would imagine that's his first strategy is when they give us the chance to all cancel, I'll convince everyone to cancel. And clearly from the trailer, he does it. Did you watch this?
Yeah. And we've watched a lot of these trailers and I've sort of rolled my eyes and, waved hands and said, same here. But this one, and maybe they've already shown it. Maybe for all I know, we talked about it and I've already forgotten about it. But I believe this is the first time that they've indicated, what if there was somebody who loved the game, who, the right kind of sociopath that wants to see everyone burn. And that purple-haired dude that very briefly, clearly instigated something during red light, green light. Let's take the first season as its own self-contained, narrative in which the forces that be, everything, they keep everything trapped within a bubble. And then we get a little bit of a crack at the end. But at this time, it's like, no. Now the new arena includes the sub-arena of the game. But then it's like, what if there are people who want to protect the sub-arena that are in the game and so on?
Yeah.
So
and new
see
games.
where they're headed.
There's some hints at some different stuff. You're not going to get the same exact sequence of games as you did last time, although it does start with red light, green light.
I would imagine that's an intentional decision to start with a known one and to kind of keep everyone's focus on that one so they don't ask the question. Like one thing that you don't, because we talked about how art doesn't exist in a vacuum, especially not now with the internet. The last thing you want is to hint too hard about new games, because then the fan communities go hard to work making up all the fun new games they can imagine. And of course, they don't have to deal with realities like budgets or execution or anything like that. And then you run the risk of, and we saw this kind of like with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, that thunder was all stolen by the time the Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse had come out. And then on top of that, the live action Spider-Man, it's like, by the time Doctor Strange showed up with the crazy Multiverse of Madness, I believe they went to one world where green means stop and red means go.
Whoa, they stole that from Sliders.
Yeah, right? That's right. But so likewise, I think it's good that they kept the focus away from what new games were coming up, because you don't want to be in a contest with
Squid Game itself is a great example of that original property that grabs attention unexpectedly. And this will be a great test of the premise of, if people love the original, they are likely to want to have more. We'll see if that's true with Squid Game 2.
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Well, this is I'm going to tip a old magician bit. They call it multiple outs, right? So let's say you got 3 objects, and then whatever, pick one of those. Well, I've been influencing you the whole time. Look at the pencil you wrote down your selection with, and it says you will pick this thing. Mm-hmm. And then if they don't, you're like, look at this envelope that you're writing on the back of. What's inside? It says you will pick this thing. So anyway, you could do the same thing with, we had the self-contained unit of story with season 1 of Squid Game. Now we're at season 2, and it could go one of two ways, right? Either it's a middling success, in which case we limp along with as little as a mini series, or what's the series that's going to wrap it up with essentially a movie? It doesn't matter, instead of a 3rd season. But you can wind it down, or you can wind it up. Like, let's say the 2nd season somehow is an even bigger deal than the 1st season. Then you could do the 3rd season and end with a movie.
Yeah. Although the creator of Squid Game is like, I didn't know if I could make a sequel. I don't think I can make another one. There's always a number that can fall into a piggy bank above you with.
Oh, I'm sorry. What? Benioff and Weiss? Put them on. They'll be great.
So we'll see. But yeah, I think it's real smart to start with red light, green light, and then shift to other games, because you want that familiarity of like, oh, cool. This is just like the first one, but different. That's fun. Let me see what's different. And then the minute you're done with that, you're like, well, now it's just a retread of the first one. So that's when you switch it up and give somebody something different. I don't know, but we'll see if he can pull it off again. I think it's every possibility that he can. Meanwhile, there's other stuff that we have been watching, which we'll tell you in Buried Treasure.
Most people want to know why they suddenly got rich.
Buried treasure.
And most people want to know, why is it called Buried Treasure? And we tell them, because it's treasures of viewing that we have found buried in our streaming libraries. And then we tell you about them here. They're not necessarily new things, although sometimes they are. Brian, what about you?
You know what? We had, for the Thanksgiving holiday, my daughter, who's 20 years old, came down from college, and she doesn't like horror movies at all, but she wanted to try watching Alien. And
okay.
So
do you know why? Was somebody talking about it at school or?
Yeah, I think a friend of hers was saying, "Oh, it's really good," and I think I got her to watch Aliens a while ago, but she was like ready to kind of like buckle up and do the suspense horror thing.
Yep.
And when you consider Alien of its time, it is so remarkable in so many different ways. From the art design, the H.R. Giger inspired art, the fact that so much glamour is always lurking in the shadows, the moody cinematography, the surprise of, spoiler alert for that movie, one of the crew members being, an android, and that
and famously championed as one of the best examples of a movie that hides the actual threat, and you don't see it forever.
Yeah, you really don't. I think there's maybe fewer than 3 minutes of the alien in the whole movie. And one of the times it shows up, it did jazz hands. I kid you not. It goes, ah. But man, it was really weird to watch it again with like storytelling eyes. Like they spend 5 full minutes gearing up to blow up the Nostromo, and then she goes to leave, and I guess just wants the cat, and then turns and nearly dies. Spending 5 minutes shutting down the self-destruct sequence on the Nostromo, and then just decides it's time to go now. It's like there's a lot of just becausing in that movie that I never saw before, and I don't know if it holds up. And keep in mind, for anybody who wants to send us hate mail at cordkillers@gmail.com, understand, I was as surprised as anybody, as somebody who's watched this movie a million times and loves it, that this time I was like, wow, man, there's a lot of nothing here. And part of it has to be because like Prometheus ruined so much of the surprise or the mystery and so on.
But do you like the characters?
Not really. Not really any of them.
To your earlier point. Yes, the story has problems, but those problems were always there. And I bet you even noticed them, but forgave them. I wonder if your opinion about what makes a good character has changed.
I think that might almost certainly be it. Because everybody was very one-dimensional. Now, it might be what I think of as the Godfather problem. By the time I had seen The Godfather, I had seen, grown up with all the parodies.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a joke, right? Everyone's pranking me that this movie's good.
Yeah. Even though you've seen Alien, like now it has pervaded culture so much that it just doesn't hit the way it used to. Yeah.
Yeah.
What did your daughter think of it?
She loved it. And I did not disabuse her of that notion. I saved all of that. I'm not here to yuck on anyone's yum.
Maybe you just hit the rewatch limit. Maybe every property only has a certain amount of rewatches before you tip over into ultra critical, and you just hit that moment for yourself with Alien.
Yeah, or maybe the world just like, I was trying to think of like, why are they obviously not really typing? And then I had to do the math and figure out, oh, Tom Skerritt did not know how to touch type. Nobody knew, unless you worked in the secretary pool in 1977 or whatever. Nobody
used keyboards.
Nobody knew how to touch type.
Yeah,
and
good point.
There's a lot that they got wrong, and some that they got weirdly right, technologically speaking or whatever. But man, do they walk down that one hallway 5 times? That was a cool hallway.
And those are things that definitely your production brain is going to notice more now than they would have in the past. But also just people in general didn't care about that stuff, right? The fact that you were sitting in a theater with, a 500-foot alien projected in front of you was enough. And it's to me, it's like with resolution, right? Like, we didn't care about low res until we got higher res. And then 720 started to not look good because we got used to 1080. And then 1080 started to not look good because we had we had HDR, so maybe it's like, hallway 5 times, I could forgive that because all movies have to deal with that until suddenly they figure out, no, we don't have to do that anymore. And then it becomes apparent.
Yeah.
I want to recommend The Trunk. on Netflix. It is, I'm halfway through. So I reserve the right to rescind this recommendation later, depending on how it ends. But it is that kind of show that's a mystery factory where you're like, okay, this is either going to end really unsatisfying or blow my mind. The premise is this music producer is forced by his ex-wife to agree to a contract marriage from a secret marriage service. So this marriage service lets people contract to be married to someone for a limited amount of time. A lot of the use case for that justified the service that comes out in the plot is like, I only have 3 months to live. I want someone to spend my last days with, kind of thing. But you know, if you can pay the fee, you can sign up and get a contract wife or husband. And it's a manipulative character story because the ex-wife is like, well, if you can be married to this contract wife for a year, then I'll come back to you. And the ex-wife also is doing a contract marriage during this time. And this is a secret service. And so they're not supposed to let on to anybody else that they are having a contract wedding. There's also a flash forward mystery going on where this trunk is being pulled out of the river and the police are discovering things about it. You don't know if it's a murder or what's going on, and you're starting to piece together little pieces, and you see characters from your present day story and this future story walk through, and you're like, wait, why is that person there? And so it's a great mystery, like interpersonal relationship manipulation story that's being told here. And halfway through, I'm having a great time. I'm like, ooh, they're doing the thing where they give me a little bit of an answer, but then bring up another question. I know that can end in tears, so I'm not putting myself under any disillusionment that it might end with me going, oh, they didn't answer half the questions. But so far, it's an 8-episode series. I think it's worth it just for the 4 episodes of fun that I've had so far, and it's one of the few where we've been like, should we watch another one? Yeah, let's watch the next one.
And this is this is not an international import. This is an American. Netflix original. This is
a Netflix original, but it is Korean actors. But there is a dub. So if the language it puts you off, you can do that. So, but it is not it's airing on some other network and they're bringing it to Netflix.
Very cool. And it was called Trunk. What?
The Trunk.
The Trunk.
Yeah. Go check it out on Netflix. If you got something we should be on the lookout for, why don't you try emailing us, cordkillers@gmail.com. Brian, how was your Black Friday this week?
Oh, it was quiet. I got a little bit disillusioned with Black Friday because the whole world figured out that, wait a minute, they're just saying prices are low. And yeah, I guess they were low, but they were low all month. And it's like everyone's kind of just paying lip service to Black Friday bargains being scarce or whatever. Speaking of which, note to self, I have to raise all my prices for scam stuff. But I think part of the other problem is that our friends over at Yes More and Company have made it too easy to do my holiday shopping. That's right. Yes More and Company, our sponsor. Now, people are saying, hey, I thought I'm a patron. I thought I'd get it ad free. Who are these deep-pocketed Yes More and Co. big wigs? It's our friend Brett, you ninnies. We said
Amtrekker. So. It's freaking Amtrekker, okay?
Yes. If you want Brett Rounsaville to be sending you text messages and making you smile, then head on over to join.yesmoreandco.com. That's join.yesmoreandco.com. Sign up. There'll be like a silly $2 thing. It's the reason that they're charging $2 to get on the list is they have to run a transaction first so that you get the joy of just a cool thing shows up with a story and you simply type the words yes or more. If you do nothing, then no penalty. Congrats. They get it. You didn't want this one.
Yeah. The one that came out today, I have. And the only reason I have is I participated in a test with the company when Brett was putting it together. It's a bamboo dish scrubber, which
I saw that one.
Genius, because it doesn't wear out. It actually gets things off of pots, and it dries fast. And you're not always having to change out sponges or, having steel like pieces all over your sink. It's fantastic. So I don't know, man. I've already said yes to one item, this month, because I couldn't help it. I was like, no, I really do have to have that. And it's easy. You just type yes. And then because they've charged you the minimal thing, they can just charge your card and send it to you. And you've got a wonderful present for someone, possibly yourself.
Yeah. That's join.yesmoreandco.com. Also, sign up on my email list, gimme.scamstuff.com. I'm going to make an announcement either tonight or tomorrow.
Go do it, folks. Tell them Cordkillers sent you. And then scan the horizon.
Send a scanning to avoid.
Scanning the horizon!
You would be forgiven if these two items in scanning the horizon made you think that you had listened to an older version of Cordkillers. But I am holding up the virtual newspaper right now to prove it is December 2nd, 2024. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade had 23.6 million viewers in its live airing on NBC. That's not even counting the Pacific Coast that gets it delayed. The live airing on NBC from 8:30 a.m. to noon Eastern. It was the most watched entertainment special on linear TV since the Academy Awards in February 2020. There were 31.3 million viewers total when you throw in all of us West Coasters who watched it later and people who just watched it on demand on Peacock. That's a lot of people watching a parade, Brian.
Well, especially a miserable parade in the rain.
Yes.
Which I know is the case because I was one of those households, which makes me kind of want to poke around, Tom, on what it counts to be watching. Like, for example, everybody turned this on. I don't think anybody sat there with a tub of popcorn in their lap. With
Sure.
attention,
No, this is
float by
classic
float.
Nielsen rating. So this isn't a mystery. If the Nielsen rated family has it on for 5 minutes, that counts. I think Nielsen does require somebody to be in the room these days. I think that's part of it.
Well,
but
now hold on. I thought that Nielsen traditional numbers were concurrent viewers at all times. Like if something was a half hour long,
there are, but they report all kinds of different numbers. I don't know that this is concurrent. I think it's 23.6 million viewers. That is a good question. If it's 23.6 million concurrent, then it would be an even bigger number of
but
total
almost
viewers.
certainly they would be touting that number.
Exactly, which makes me think, no, this is 23.6 million people tuned in for at least 5 minutes and probably longer.
Which is about how much I watch. But when I was thinking about like, that's a very big number, but does it count as a view? And then I thought, what's another big number that I saw recently? And I thought, the Paul Tyson fight.
The Tyson.
And then I was like, yeah, I don't know how many people were watching that with their full rapt attention the entire time too.
Yeah. I also don't think it matters that much.
I agree.
If there's people around, even if they're not paying attention and this thing is on, that's a win, because advertisers don't really care that everyone's paying attention to every single minute of the Macy's Day Parade. Advertisers care that somebody in a moment of distraction looked over and saw their ad and became aware of their brand name. And then hopefully that repeated 50,000 times in other places got it to stick in that person's head.
Yep.
But man, I guess I was surprised that you had that many people watching the live airing. Now, when we say linear TV, that includes YouTube TV, DirecTV Stream, Hulu Live TV, etc. But just people saying, yeah, I'm going to turn on the live Macy's Day Thanksgiving Day Parade when they could watch anything. You don't have to turn on. It's not like back in the day when they're like, well, there's not much on at 8:30 in the morning and it's Thanksgiving morning and I'm getting ready to make meal. Let's turn on the parade. You could have had anything. You could have been playing music. You could have been watching videos or plenty of live streams. Like that's a lot of people decided specifically to be like, no, you know what? I'm going to do the traditional thing.
That's interesting. It makes me. I would love to get a sociologist's take on, like, what you just said implies to me that everybody watching, turning it on to ignore it, was purely engaged in childhood nostalgia. Like, it was a institution because it was the only game in town, because that real estate was so poorly valued. And now people are actively like, oh, but I want the boring thing that I love to ignore to be on.
More people this year than any time since 2020 decided to have that nostalgia.
Exactly. That's my point is I wonder what that means because, well, as a matter of fact, our next story is about the box office numbers during the Thanksgiving weekend.
Yes. People went to the movies. Thanksgiving's 5-day U.S. box office hit 422 million, breaking the record from 2018. So we're going back pre-COVID numbers here. That was when Ralph Breaks the Internet drove the Thanksgiving weekend to 315.6 million. So it didn't just break it, it smashed it. Moana 2.
Yeah, I wonder how long it's going to take till we get to play the movie draft again.
I guess it's where you don't have any more excuses. It's just up to us to do it.
I think we will need to have fewer players this go around.
Yeah, possibly. Maybe this is a little out of left field, but this constructs a picture in the U.S. on Thanksgiving, a holiday in the U.S., where people got up and said, you know what? I'm just going to watch the Macy's parade, and then made their meal and sat down and ate turkey and cranberries, by God, the typical stuffing, and then said, and now we shall go to see the Moana. Let's go to the movies, family. Maybe, and this is where I'm coming out of left field, this is people saying, you know what? I'm tired of new things. I'm tired of having to struggle with new ways of thinking and new ways of doing things. Let me just go back to what we used to do.
I think there's something to that. And this is why, if you're a sociologist, please write us at cordkillers@gmail.com.
All right, let's move on to the chatter.
You've got mail.
Oh, Matt B wrote us. Matt B wrote us and unintentionally made my hip hurt.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, made me feel that little crick in my neck. Made me see a couple more wrinkles, on the forehead. Matt wrote, Warehouse 13 is a classic from the golden era of Sci-Fi Channel.
The long ago before 4 times of the moving picture shows.
I remember watching Warehouse 13 on iQIYI because I was catching up and there was no on-demand back then.
I think we covered the ending of
we did.
Warehouse 13.
We absolutely did. Anyway, Matt is bringing it up because it might be worth a rewatch, which he's absolutely right. And then noted that Con Man is from 2016, was created by and stars Alan Tudyk. It is hilarious and has lots of famous guest stars. Episodes are short, so you might have to double up for the full experience if you did it that way. But I remember us talking about Con Man as well.
Yeah. We were talking about how we loved the idea of shining a spotlight on an interesting subculture that the bulk of Americans were unfamiliar with, unless you've been to Dragon Con.
Man, Warehouse 13 is a really good full experience suggestion.
I've never seen any of it.
And I watched every single episode and enjoyed it thoroughly. From beginning to end. There are a few shows where I never saw the ending, including The Office, the U.S. Office. I didn't watch the last couple episodes. Warehouse 13, I watched all the way to the end.
Felicia Day was in that one, right?
She was in some later seasons. You're right. I'd actually forgotten that. Yeah, definitely. So thank you, Matt. We will add that to the list. You can let us know what you think, cordkillers@gmail.com. Our website is cordkillers.com, and we are live at twitch.tv/Night Attack Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. I reckon we'll talk to you next time.
We're making a game of it, aren't we? John.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Good thing I know how to do that.